When you think of an old master painting, you probably picture it hanging in some grand museum, right? Behind velvet ropes. But what if I told you that these incredible treasures are also used to secure massive, seven-figure loans in the world of high-end pawnbrokering? It's a surprising world where priceless art becomes really powerful financial collateral. So let's dive in.
It kind of sounds like the start of a bad joke, doesn't it? What could a Rembrandt possibly have in common with a home loan? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. Collateral. That's right. Both of them can be used to back a major loan, unlocking a ton of cash without you ever having to sell the asset itself.
And here's the core idea. For people who own major artworks, this is a way to get what's called liquidity. Cash, basically. A luxury pawnbroker or a specialized lender will appraise the art, give you a loan against its value, and then they hold onto it, totally safe and secure. You get the money you need, and you still own your masterpiece. So, which artists are the absolute gold standard for this kind of thing? Well, let's start with the real titans of the art world. We're talking about the names whose legendary status and just astronomical auction prices make them a lender's dream come true. Just take a look at this number for a second. $450 million. It's a figure that didn't just break records, it completely reset the entire art market. You gotta be asking yourself, what painting on earth could possibly be worth that much? That was the price tag for Leonardo da Vinci's Salvator Mundi. Now, Da Vinci produced very, very few paintings. So when you combine that mind-boggling rarity with a price like this, it makes any authentic piece by him one of the most powerful assets you could possibly use for a loan. But listen, it's not just about finding another Salvator Mundi. That's not realistic. Even carefully documented drawings or works that came out of his studio can be incredibly valuable. For a lender, this is where the real work happens. It's all about deep scholarly research. That's what truly unlocks the value. Okay, next up, Rembrandt. Now with Rembrandt, it's a totally different story than Da Vinci's rarity. His strength as collateral comes from the sheer breadth of his work. I mean, he did it all. Portraits, biblical scenes, landscapes, not to mention a huge number of etchings and drawings. All of that creates this deep international market with tons of sales data for lenders to analyze. And you might think you need some massive oil painting, but that's not always the case. In fact, authenticated etchings or drawings by Rembrandt are fantastic for collateral. You know why? They're just more practical for the lender. Think about it. They're way easier to store, cheaper to insure, and if it ever came to it, easier to resell. Now, if you're talking about the top of the Baroque market, you have to talk about Peter Paul Rubens. This guy was a superstar in his day, famous for these huge, dramatic altarpieces and mythologies. And he had this highly organized and well-documented studio. That fame and the volume of his work make him very familiar territory for auction houses and, you guessed it, lenders. But again, it all comes down to practicality. You're not going to try to pawn a giant altarpiece. It's just not going to happen. But a well-documented oil sketch, or a smaller religious panel, or even a really high-quality painting from a studio, those can be easily benchmarked against auction records, making them perfect for securing a loan. Okay, so we've seen the icons. Let's move on to our next category. These are the artists who might not have those crazy, once-in-a-generation auction prices like a Da Vinci, but their long and incredibly steady market history makes them super reliable assets. A perfect example, Canaletto. His sun-drenched, incredibly precise views of Venice and London are instantly recognizable. I mean, you know one when you see one. And they've been consistently bought and sold for centuries, which means there's a really rich set of auction records that lenders can use to confidently figure out a valuation. His work is beautiful, sure, but it's also a surprisingly predictable commodity. Let's compare two absolute giants of British art, J.M.W. Turner and Thomas Gainsborough. They had completely different styles, right? Turner with his radical, atmospheric, almost abstract seascapes, and Gainsborough with his elegant, traditional portraits. But both are fantastic for collateral because they represent the very core of the British art market and have a long, steady, and very predictable auction history. And speaking of portraits, you have to talk about Anthony van Dyck. He was a student of Rubens and later became the court painter in England. He literally created the image of 17th century nobility. His elegant, flowing portraits are so central to the old master market, making any authenticated work with a strong ownership history a very, very safe bet for a lender. All right, our final category is kind of for the insiders. These are the artists whose value isn't just about widespread fame, it's amplified by rarity and a more specialized connoisseur level appeal. This is where deeper market knowledge really comes into play. Okay, so everybody knows Canaletto, but have you heard of his nephew, Bernardo Bellato? He painted similar cityscapes, but with a cooler, sharper, more precise style. Now, he might be less famous than his uncle, but his works are much rarer, and that gives them a special kind of appeal to serious collectors. And for a lender, that rarity can translate to some serious value. Here's another one for you. Lucas Cranach the Elder. He was active during the Protestant Reformation, and his style is this very unique, unmistakable German Renaissance look. His sinuous nudes and his sharp portraits of figures like Martin Luther, they just really stand out in the market. But, and this is a big but, with a specialist like Cranach, there's a huge caveat. Because his name has been tied to debates about authenticity and even forgeries over the years, a lender is going to scrutinize the paperwork like you wouldn't believe. They're going to want to see technical reports, scholarly articles, and a rock-solid exhibition history before they even think about approving a loan. So, we've looked at the icons, the market favorites, and the connoisseur picks. But what's the common thread here? What are the fundamental principles that tie all of these artists together? You know, what does a lender really look for, no matter whose name is on the canvas? It really all boils down to these 4 things. Step 1, and this is the big one, authentication. Is it the real deal? Step 2, condition. How well has it been taken care of? Step 3, provenance. That's just the fancy word for its ownership history. A painting owned by royalty is worth a lot more than one with a mysterious past. And finally, step 4, market data. What if similar pieces sold for recently? So at the end of the day, here's the ultimate takeaway. A famous signature just isn't enough. The real value, the value a lender can actually bank on, comes from the verifiable proof. It's the documents, the history, and the cold, hard data that back up the art. That's what unlocks its financial power. And that kind of leaves us with a fascinating final thought. We all know these masterpieces have this immense cultural value, right? They represent the absolute height of human creativity. But as we've just seen, they also have a powerful, quantifiable financial value. It really makes you wonder, in the long arc of history, which one of those 2 values will actually prove to be more enduring?